sponge filter has been the workhorse of many fish rooms through many generations. So let's unleash this filter and show you everything about it.
Hello there, fellow fish keepers. It's Mike here with the Fish Tank Barn. I'd like to welcome you guys back to another video. Today we're going to film this outside. It's a beautiful day here in Michigan, so it's time to head outside a little bit, get some fresh air. So I hope this video finds both you and your fish happy and healthy. Today we're going to talk about one of the best and most cost-effective ways to filter your aquarium, the sponge filter. But I do want to talk to you guys about how this works. So basically how a sponge filter will work is that there's an air source going through the middle. So most of the time you'll have something like an air line coming through here. That air line will suck water through the sponge here and then out the top. And as the water is drawn through the sponge, the pores in the sponge will provide a lot of biological filtration. Alright, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to show you guys all the pieces of a sponge filter and how to actually set one up. So first thing we have here is your base. A lot of times these will be weighted. I personally like the Aquarium Co-op sponge because it has this really nice thick weighted base, so your sponge has no problem sinking. The next piece for your sponge on your sponge filter is this. This is the strainer. So on the top of this you'd have an air line right here. What that will do is that will bubble and that will draw the water through the sponge. And then you have your sponge, which obviously goes on here, goes on your base like so. And then the last piece of this is the uplift tube, which you just basically connect right on the top. So if you're connecting your airline and using the uplift tube, all right, there's a nipple on the top here. So what you want to do is stick your airline tubing. Want to make sure your airline tubing is going through your uplift tube, and there's a nipple on the top here, which then you just stick your airline onto the nipple, and then you just attach the uplift tube like so. You got your uplift tube attached, and then you just hook up your sponge filter to an air source, and then you're good to go. One of the last things that you need to consider when setting up your sponge filter is you need to put a check valve or make sure that your air pump is higher than the level of your sponge filter, or else you'll create a siphon and flood your fish room and flood your house. In discussing sponge filters, one thing we need to be mindful of is pores per square inch, or PPI. So PPI is basically the number of pores per square inch. The higher the number, the more pores there will be per square inch of sponge. So why you think you may want to have more pores per square inch, because you would have more surface for beneficial bacteria. It may actually be beneficial to have a more coarse sponge, which would have a lower PPI. If you have a sponge with extremely high PPI, you may actually have to clean it more often. Depending on your cleaning regimen, that could lead to algae and other issues. There are many pros to sponge filters, but there are some cons as well. One of the great things about them is there are no moving parts, so there's nothing really to break. Unlike something like a canister filter or hang-on back filter that has a mechanical mechanism to it that could go bad, that would either need to be replaced or actually damage the entire unit. So if you have a fish room with multiple tanks, it would be a lot more cost effective to run a bunch of these sponge filters, which cost maybe about $10 a piece, to running a bunch of canister filters or hang-on back filters, which can be $20, $30, $40, even hundreds of dollars depending on what model you choose. Also, sponge filters are very easy to set up. Like we showed previously in this video, it is really easy to set one of these up. It takes about 2-3 minutes per sponge filter and you're good to go. The sponge also does provide a very good food source for things like your shrimp and other microorganisms to feed off of. So if you have one aquarium set up, you can keep an extra sponge filter in there and have the beneficial bacteria growing on it. So when the time comes to set up your new tank, you can already take your already seeded sponge, put it in the next tank, and you're already ready to start your cycle, which will be done in almost no time. One of the major cons with this is it can be unsightly. So you have this big black thing bubbling in the tank. So one way I do find to counteract that is you can put some tall plants. Something like a Vallisneria species would be really good because those do get quite tall. So you can cover this with some tall plants and then you would just see the bubbles going up. Or you could put some rock work in front of it or some sort of other decoration. The other complaint that you can have with these is that they're noisy. You know, the air pumps that run these that can be kind of noisy at times, as well as the bubbling sound. If you're looking to have your fish room completely quiet, if you're doing videography in there, or if it just is in your bedroom or somewhere else, having that bubbling sound may not be the most attractive option for you. There are some ways to mitigate some of the bubbling noise, which we will get to towards the end of the video. but that is definitely something to consider, is the noise level that these make. So let's head on now and talk about how to maintain these filters. So let's go ahead now and talk about how to maintain a sponge filter. It's actually fairly simple. So all you want to do is go ahead and grab your filter. You just want to grab it carefully in order to not disturb any of the detritus that's captured in the filter. Take it out of your tank. And then taking a bucket of clean aquarium water to avoid killing your beneficial bacteria. And then you just want to squeeze it out. This one didn't have a lot in it, but keep squeezing it until it's clean. So a lot of times there will be a ton of detritus coming out of it. So just keep squeezing it. And then you just want to hook it back up and put it into your tank. It's really simple. So let's go ahead now and talk about some sponge filter modifications. So the first modification I want to talk about is actually adding an air stone to it. So what that will do is it will increase the flow through the sponge, as well as work to reduce the noise. I'm going to go ahead here and I'll show you how to do that. Just cut a little piece, and then you can take this bad boy apart. Alright, so we got it taken apart here. Actually, that comes off, makes it a little bit easier. So you can stick your airline right in there. Stick your air stone on here. And then you can reassemble. So take this green piece, put it back on, goes in there, which I was afraid it'd be a little bit too long. It's no big deal. You just take it and snip it off a little bit. Just snip it off a little bit. Snip it off a little bit. Stick it in there. Like that. Goes on like that. Sponge goes back on. Sponge is back on. And then we put this on there. So what we'll do now is we'll go test this one versus just a normal sponge filter. So we'll put that one back in the box so we know who's who. And we'll go ahead and run a little bit of a test on that. The next thing I'm going to show you guys is another way you can increase the flow a little bit out of sponge filters if you put an elbow on it. I happen to find here that if you use a 3/4 inch CPVC elbow, and if you push it in there hard enough, it actually will stay on here. So if you look inside it, you do have to kind of go past the point of where the little ridge is where you connect it, but it does work pretty good. So what you want to do in this particular case is you want to take a drill bit, you want to take a drill, and very carefully you want to put a hole kind of in the top here. So we'll go ahead and do that. Alright, now that we've got our hole made, we're going to go ahead and feed our tube through. So I'll feed a piece of airline tubing through here. All right, so you feed your airline through here. You're gonna feed this. You're gonna feed this through here. Go up just like you normally would. And there you go. And voila. Got it all rigged up and ready to go. It's not pretty, but we'll go ahead and test that one out too.
Let's go ahead now and test all of these different filter modifications and see how well they work. So just to kind of lay out the test a little bit, we're testing them on the same airline, and then what I'm going to do is put a side-by-side picture of each of them, and then at the end, go ahead and put a side-by-side of all four at the same time, so you can view for yourself which ones you think work better than others. You're now looking at the sponge filter just running by itself, just the way it's designed to set up. That's basically our baseline, and then from there we'll go ahead and I'll show you each of the modifications. Okay, now we're looking at the sponge filter running with the air stone in the middle. So I'm going to go ahead now and put that side by side with our baseline. We're now looking at the modification that includes our baseline sponge filter, along with putting the elbow on top of it. So we'll go ahead and see what that does here in the split screen. Alright, so we're now looking at the final modification here. We didn't show it on the video because it's actually pretty simple, but this is the elbow along with the air stone. So let's go ahead now and look at the split screen of this one versus our baseline as well. Well there, fellow fish keepers, I definitely do hope you enjoyed this video and learned a little bit more about sponge filters. Encourage you to check out some of the other videos on the channel. So if you like what you see, go ahead and hit that subscription button, ding the notification bell so you don't miss any further updates on the channel. With that being said, stay fishy, keep on breeding, stay safe. We'll catch you guys on the next video.